Right, a very warm welcome to everyone. Today we have with us a very good friend of mine, Mr. Andy Pharoah. I had the pleasure of working with Andy back as far back as 2006. Can you believe that, Andy? It was that long ago. And Andy's always been a sensational person who has always captured the spirit of the Mars company at a time in particular when brand, sustainability and purpose have never been more important. So today we ask our students to put forward some questions to Andy about what purpose, brand and sustainability mean at Mars, the world's leading manufacturer of chocolate and consumer goods. So I'd like to give way to our students. Thank you.
Okay, so now we can start with a question. The first one to ask his question is going to be Cyprian. If you can please just start.
Yes, thank you very much. So now, because we all know that this whole situation with the virus and pandemic has been a total menace in the last 2 years, my question is, how did Mars handle the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, we started by setting some principles. We set 3 principles at the beginning of it, which was we basically said there's an awful lot we don't know. And so number 1 is we need to prioritize associate health and safety. So we call our employees associates. Number 2 is we need to do our part to stop the spread of the virus. And number 3 was we need to protect business continuity. And throughout it, when there were so many uncertainties, we have a Mars purpose of the world we want tomorrow starts with how we do business today. And in fact, we used that quite a lot of times to decide policies of, does this contribute to the world we want tomorrow? And that our actually CEO did it. So we managed it in different stages but for a good part of it, our crisis team was our executive leadership team. I led the crisis throughout. We were quite conservative. We shut down early. We shut down before governments were giving that advice to do so. We cut down travel. We're still restricting travel. Our mortality rate is 40 times lower than the general public. So for associates who have caught COVID, which we've had associates, and we've had associates who died. We employ people in 80 countries. We've 140,000 people in around 80 countries. Through really a very broad range of jobs. We have lost people, but the mortality rate is a fraction of what it is for the general public. So I think it worked well. We also, we did a whole bunch of policies to ensure that people didn't have to choose between doing the right thing for their health and doing the right thing for their colleagues' health and doing the right thing for their wallet. We did a bunch of stuff around community. Interestingly, over 90% of our associates strongly agreed that the way we handled COVID was in line with our purpose. So we got a good response, and I think that the lower fatalities and otherwise be the case spoke for itself.
That's great. Thank you, Andy. Okay, go ahead with the next question.
So now packaging plays important roles in ensuring the product highest quality and safety standards, and we are all thinking about a healthy environment and how we can create a product which can satisfy everyone. Now my question is, as a great amount of plastic is used in the packaging of chocolate, is Mars looking into a biodegradable wrapping?
Yes, I mean we have a target to by 2025 have 100% of our packaging, which is essentially recyclable or reusable, etc. We'll at the same time we're working on a country by country basis to get infrastructure in place, because in the end you can have products that are technically recyclable, but is there actually the infrastructure to do it? And then the third element will consumers do it? I think particularly in confectionery products where there's a fair bit of out-of-home consumption, and you're often dealing with smaller products, we are absolutely looking at biodegradability, and we're looking at at that as part of the. I mean, the reality is some packaging is going to be littered. we can't control it. There's always going to be an element and if your product is eaten on the go, then you will probably going to see more littering than something typically that's consumed in a home occasion. So we are looking at it. We're working with partners. It's hard, of course, because the primary job of packaging is to keep a product safe. And first of all, you need to keep the consumer safe, and then you need to give it some shelf life. There's not much point producing a packaging that after 2 days the product has degraded. So you've got to have these really strong barrier properties for food safety, for product quality reasons, that have got to get you through complex supply chains to get them to consumers, and consumers don't necessarily want to eat them on the moment they buy them and things like that. And so all the things that make packaging good to protect products are also the same things that make it very hard to get rid of when it is littered. So it's a huge technical challenge, but clearly very important.
Thank you very much. And my third and last questions is, what are the biggest challenge that Mars might be facing in the next 10 years?
I mean, look, there are so many big challenges. I mean, you've got a pretty big one behind you on your screen, which is Earth. And I think that really climate change is a huge challenge, and we have some very aggressive targets to reduce our emissions, to get to net zero, and to deliver real reduction. Yes, it's a mix of things. It will be absolute reductions as well as offsetting. You need to do both. You're always going to need to do both when you have agricultural business. While there's a route to get energy to zero, I've yet to see a route that can get, when you grow things, to zero. And when we do use a lot of agricultural products. So I think climate change and how we respond to that and how we really deliver that is one of the biggest challenges. But it's a big challenge every day simply to meet consumer needs and preferences. And if we don't meet consumer needs and preferences, we can forget about everything else, because without performance, purpose is simply not possible.
Thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. My first question is, what are your biggest challenges you have overcome in Mars?
If you're asking for me personally, I think the biggest challenge I've overcome, but time will tell, is moving us from being a very quiet company externally to a company that only talked to the world through its consumer brands, to actually a company that talks about the company, that has a purpose, that goes out and regularly talks on a range of issues that it believes are important to its consumers, it believes important to its customers, it believes important to the world, and that sort of going and telling our story is a step change. The old joke was that there are two very secretive organizations in McLean, Virginia. There's Mars Incorporated and the CIA, and the difference between the two of them is there is a sign telling you where the CIA is. So we've gone from that story to something where we are talking much more fun, and that's quite a big cultural change. And of course, when your company is owned by a family, and we still have the family owns the company 100%, and many of them are called Mars. And so when you're what we say and do externally in some ways is speaking for them. And so you have to be really careful when you do it. You're actually talking about people when you're talking about Mars, which is, I think, one of the reasons why there was an element of reticence about telling the story.
Thank you. My next question is for you. How do you motivate your team?
I think you do it. I do it in many different ways. I mean, I think it starts from listening. And it starts from listening, having a genuine commitment to their development, to have a genuine commitment to a care about them, and for having a clear set of sort of shared objectives. I think teams also work better not in the sort of the one-on-one hub and spoke approach where I have a one-to-one relationship with them. I think it's far better also when you've got a team of people and you agree that this is what you're going to do as a team. I also think for that to work, you as the leader have to be willing for that team to decide to do something that's different to what you want them to do. Can't be on the fundamentals, because in the end, I'm accountable for the fundamentals. But that people have to be able to say no, or I want to do things a different way, for their yes to mean anything.
Thank you. My last question is, in your role, how do you manage your time?
Do you mean sort of my time between work and home life, or do you mean what do I spend focus on?
You can squeeze it in and do both.
Okay, right. I think the way I try to manage my time is to set myself some pretty clear priorities, both from a personal thing and from a work thing, and so that of coming in to each day with a set of things I want to achieve, but also being equally focused about what I want to do at the weekends. How do I ensure I've booked my vacations and those kind of things, and to seek to be present about it. Work expands to fill time available, and so in the end, sometimes you just need to be able to let things go, and at a certain point say, you know what, I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to spend the weekends working. I'll work at the weekends if there is a need, if there's a genuine thing that's come up and there's a genuine need to respond. But I could easily, if I just sat with my inbox, I could happily spend 14 hours a day profitably filling myself, but probably so I think it's just about having boundaries and setting priorities, and doing that as much for your personal life as you do it for your work life.
What is the main thing that makes you stand out from your competitors?
It's a very good question. Honestly, we have very, very diverse categories. Now, you've all got confectionery products behind you, apart from Maureen, who's got a rather nice window. But you've all got confectionery products behind them. In fact, that is not our biggest business. Our biggest business is pet care. And our biggest single group of employees, or associates as we call them, is actually veterinary care. We own over 3,000 veterinary hospitals around the world. And so, we have got businesses that do, Fitbits for dogs. We have dog DNA. We have ancestry.com for your pet. We have pet food. We have veterinary care. We have confectionery. We have food. It's a very, very vast array of products. And actually, what defines Mars is the how. There isn't an inherent link to any of our categories, really. It is very different. But how we do things, and our owners codified a set of principles, the 5 principles. If I turn here, there you go. You can see some 5 principles over that shoulder.
Yeah.
And those 5 principles were really about how you do things, and to some extent they're principles where there's tension between them, because efficiency and mutuality, they may mean different things to different people, for example. And so when we looked at our purpose, of agreeing our purpose, which we did 3 or 4 years ago, a bit longer, but 4 years ago, one of the things I was involved in, when we said what made Mars different, we actually came on that it was the benefits of a long-term approach, we think in generations, not quarters, made possible by family ownership and a very principled approach. And so that's why we came up with the purpose of the world we want tomorrow starts with how we do business today. This idea that the how of doing business really defines it. It's an active thing. It's a thing you do each day, and it's about having that long-term view. So when we came to our purpose, we didn't choose a product category, because it's almost meaningless to try to say something that prize equally. Great quality products. Well, I mean, who could possibly be against great quality products? To some extent, for a purpose to mean something, it has to be legitimate to do the opposite.
Mr. Andy, my question is, how essential is public relation for your business?
I mean, Well, the thing we went across, and the question that I had to pose to some of the people within the company, and that finally got us to say, you know what, we're going to start talking to the world, is that it was this understanding that we don't actually get a choice as to whether our story is told. We only get a choice about whether we're going to seek to influence that. And as soon as you care about what people think about you and what they say about you in any sets of publics, as you might call them, you know, it could be political, it could be regulatory, it could be your customer. When I say customers, I'm typically talking of a Tesco or a Sainsbury, or, you know, it could be of our consumers, could be people we want to who we would like to work for us, or, you know, we want, for every job we advertise, we want 10 people to apply. You know, we want to be able to get the best talent and all those kind of things. And so in all of those, you know, public relations is critically important, because it's essentially the story that we are telling about ourselves. So I think it is. And I think it's, you know, it's broad, and it's clearly critically important. We've always believed in the public relations of our brands. We've increasingly believed in that public relations mattered for our company as well.
Thank you for your answer. My next question is, what kind of research does Mars do to understand the global voice of its product?
We do. I mean, we would do an awful lot. One tends to do it country by country, and you will often notice differences on country by country, even in recipe. You know, Americans have a sweeter tooth than people in the UK, for example. So if you're, you know, there are, you know, so you're doing a whole series of testing of products, of concept with consumers. You know, when you're looking to innovate, you're looking to meet, you know, a consumer pain point, address a consumer pain point. And that can be an innovation in the product, or it can be in the business model. So, for example, you know, we find with our veterinary businesses, we have quite a few of these things called wellness plans, where people, I don't know, pay a certain amount of money each month, and then we'll get discounted services as well as regular services free. And that, you know, that in many ways helps manage the cost of pet ownership and of veterinary care. And so, you know, so research is critical. It's rarely global. You know, we don't tend to be a company that says, hey, here's a great new global product that we're going to launch globally. We're much more, while we have some global brands, there's a much greater local focus. And now, of course, we want things to be able to work across different markets. But flavor preferences do change. You know, if you, for example, you know, one of you's got double mint behind him. You know, the gum, you know, cinnamon as a flavor sells well in sort of northern Germany and the US. It doesn't sell well very much anywhere else. You know, so you know, unsurprisingly, you're going to put more effort on cinnamon flavored gum in those markets. You know, licorice is a flavor preference in some place. So I think you really need to a lot of it is responding to what the local needs are and preferences.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Andy.
My first question is, what is the one thing you would change about Mars as an organization?
I'd like to see greater diversity.
Okay.
If I could, you know, I recognise, and we recognise in the places where legally we're allowed to measure it, which we're not always. The communities that buy our products are more diverse than the company that makes those products. And so how do you tackle that? How do we see, you know, more people of color in leadership? How do we see more women in leadership? You know, and how do you do that? So I think, and that, you know, that's something that we're focused on, but it's it's hard. It's not easy.
Yeah. Okay, great. And just moving on to the second question I have here, what are you most proud of regarding the organization?
I think I'm most proud of the principles and how they're applied, and the real care and attention that people are given, and that the Mars family genuinely believe that you're joining their family when you come and work here. And so I think that it's something quite. People say a very long time, which speaks for a bunch of. I mean, my boss, the CEO, has been here over 30 years. And I've been here I think 14 years. I'm kind of a newbie.
The final one I have here: what do you do when you are outside the office? So it's similar to a question earlier, but when downtime, as it were, what do you do?
Personally, downtime. So I like walking. And so my wife and I, we're quite fortunate. Virginia is a beautiful U.S. state, really beautiful, and we're in a national park in 10 minutes drive, and we can be in the most stunning Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, an hour's drive away. So we do walking. I'm involved with the opera in Washington, so I like opera, I like music, and so I do things. I do a lot of reading. I'm at the fortunate stage where my children have left home and are making their ways in the world, and so I can do at the weekend. I can do a mixture of watching sport, reading, walking, and eating.
Andy, are you singing in the opera? Are you available for hire?
I can't sing at all.
Oh, when you say so, when you're part of you mean you visit the opera?
No, I'm on the executive committee of the Washington National Opera.
Okay.
So I sit on the executive, and I'm in charge of the marketing and audience development, or I chair the marketing and audience development committee.
Goodness me! I for a minute there, I was about to get in contact with the old guys at Hill and Knowlton and say that Andy's now doing opera. We need to go to one of his shows.
No, sadly. Well, I don't know actually. I'm not sure you'd like to come to any of my shows, but no, I'm involved.
You haven't developed much of a US accent, I've noticed. You've been there for quite a while in Washington, no?
Well, do you know what? When you move to the US when you're 42, 43, you don't tend to. It's actually a funny story. I've got two children, two sons, and they are both in their 20s now.
Oh. And
the eldest, I want to say, was probably 13 or 14 when we moved here, and the youngest was 11, 12. Those kind of ages. And it's very interesting because when you move to a foreign country, when you're 14 or 13 or 14, if you had a British accent in the UK, then you were exotic. You were interesting. 11, you're just odd.
Yeah.
And so, and you stand out. And so, interestingly, my eldest son still has a British accent. My youngest son sounds entirely American.
Wow, phenomenal.
Hi, thanks. Coming along with Norman's question, I would like to know more about your work thing. So, as a vice president, what is a typical day like for you?
I suppose the easy answer is there isn't really a typical day because it really does vary. I took a decision when I moved to this role, and my wife was also working for the company at the same time. She's stopped working for the company now. We took a decision to live incredibly close to the office, so I walk to work, and it takes me 5 minutes. I tend to start quite early, so I think I was probably in at 7:20 this morning. I'm typically in by about 7:30. Partly because if you're based on the East Coast and you're doing a global role, really the real prime time is that sort of 8 a.m. to noon slot. After that time, gradually people, you guys wouldn't be particularly happy if I phoned you in a couple of hours' time. Well, you might be, but you wouldn't be if I was phoning you every evening in a couple of hours' time. And so I tend to start quite early. I'm obviously I would always start the day looking at what's coming overnight, what are in the various news feeds, our own company's news feeds. What do I see that's going on? Are there things that I think I need to respond to? And then I spend a lot of time. So my days, and that's what's today like. I've done a couple of one-on-one meetings with team members. I did a meeting with the UK Minister of State for Trade, Penny Mordaunt. I've got this. I've got some other sessions this afternoon. You know, yesterday we had a board meeting in the morning. So it tends to be quite varied. I mean, most of what I achieve through other people. And so I spend quite a lot of time spending time with with those other people who are enabling things to be successful. So I want to make myself really available, and where the things that I'm personally driving tend to be things where it's about really trying to drive a decision on something. Net zero would be a good example. We got to a position. We'd had a -2 degrees position since Paris, and when actually Paris was -2 degrees, it wasn't -1.5. So it was a good target. It was science-based target. We took a view last year that we needed to update it, and we thought the net zero with what's changed in science with that we changed it. My real heavy lifting on that was about ensuring we had the right discussions at a leadership team level and with our board, so that decision could be made, and then some view on the messaging of what we should announce and how we should announce it. But really, the real work, once the decision was landed, the real work moved from me to people who worked for me, and so and in the case of the UK with the Earth Bar and things like that, again, I'm aware of it, but I'm not really involved in it. So I'm prioritizing my time on where are the things that I uniquely need to do to enable us to move on. And it might be to get a decision, it might be to force, not force, but it might be to say, you know what, we need to get the CFO aligned on that. And actually, it's much easier for me to get the CFO aligned than someone who reports to me. So, that's sort of, that's sort of. I try to leave by about 6 o'clock in the evening. I don't always manage it, and I try not to work at weekends, but I don't always manage it.
Second question for you is, what experiences, including in your student union role, would you say have helped you to become the person you are today?
That's a very good question. I think the biggest benefit I got from student politics and working for both at the sort of at the university level in Leicester and also for National Organisation of Labour Students was to expect hostility and to be comfortable with people vehemently disagreeing with you because of your ideas. And you're in the UK at the moment. You're seeing what Keir Starmer's going through at the moment, or the rough and tumble with and if you can, and probably the Keir Starmer stuff is probably really, in my view, completely a step too far. But nonetheless, if you look at the robustness that there is in politics, when I was working for the Labour Party, we had the ultra left who were trying to take control. And so I would go into a room, even an internal meeting room, and know that if half the people in the room didn't hate me, I wasn't doing my job properly. And so I think the idea of being comfortable with a degree of conflict around ideas, and for that to be okay, and to be willing to hold your ground on those, that taught me a lot. Also, the things of diplomacy. You don't get much done just by shouting at people, and so you have to build coalitions. You have to listen. You have to understand. Understand. Are you really opposed to me, or is it actually how can if your view is this my view, is there a middle way? So I think that world from politics I think helped, and rarely in business do you get anything as conflict driven as you do in politics. So I think that in many ways that's quite good preparation.
Thank you so much for your answers.
Now, right, so how do you keep up the reputation of a leading brand in a competitive environment?
I think, well, I'll talk corporate brand, I think, perhaps, on that one. I think the first one is you need to know what you stand for, and you need to have a very good framework around what you believe, what you do, what you're going to say, what actions you're going to take, and I think it has to be rooted in that. And then I think you need then you need to pick what you're going to want to engage on and why you're going to want to engage on it. And 95% of the time, when you engage on something, you need to have a record that you can point to. There are occasions on a topic where the fact of simply saying something is important. There are very few occasions where simply saying something, will be judged is something where that is good enough. So I think you need to have a really strong framework. You need to really pick your swim lanes, and pick on what you're going to do and not get distracted. I think one of the biggest changes I've seen since I first started talking with groups like this is that in 2005, I think it was still possible with good media relations to really influence what actually appeared. It is now impossible to influence actually what is out there. Anyone can publish anything, and it can be about outlandish, and so it's important not to get distracted by that, and you need to accept that you're going to get criticism. And if you believe something strongly, you just need to stick with it, and you need to go with it, and listen and do all those things along the way, and not do stupid things. But you just have to have a degree of confidence. So I think that is in the case. Well, I think you have to be wary of, particularly social media. This is a really difficult one. You do see companies where they kind of issues market, and they think, oh, that's a great issue for my brand, and it's a really dangerous route to go down. Honestly, does Ben and Jerry's, does it legitimately have a view on UK immigration? Does it legitimately have a view on Russian troops at the border of Ukraine? What's the basis behind the brand having a point of view on that? Can Mars Bar have a view on climate change? Well, I think it probably can. Mars and Earth, they're kind of connected in a way. The second thing is, our carbon footprint is the size of a small country. It's Costa Rica, Panama. We have the carbon footprint of a Panama. So us taking action does make a difference. So I think you have to be careful and thoughtful around how you do it. And I think if you're careful and thoughtful and have good intentions and reasons for it, I think that can get you through most things. You may make something that people react to badly or not like, or this kind of stuff. We've had that. M&M's recently. You may have seen some of the character changes on M&M's. Do people like it? Do people not like it? I think we're pretty clear why we're doing it. We're comfortable we're comfortable who made the decision within the company to make those changes.
I'm the engagement officer in LSST, and I also am the lead of employability and careers. And so I have two questions for you today. One is, if you could choose just one, which book had the biggest impact in your life and it helped you to reach where you are today?
Well, this is a super hard question, because I could one has the risk of offending people. So I am not an active Christian, but I was brought up in the Christian faith, and I think the Bible and many of the principles that it teaches you, and many of the tensions that it explores, and many of the things that therein is incredibly. It was incredibly radical. Certainly, the New Testament at the time was incredibly radical, and many people died for the right to believe it. So I come from a sort of religious background. I think that I think was important, and I still find myself occasionally using quotes that are clearly biblical quotes, Old and New Testaments. So I think that that would be. I also then generically have had a love of history.
Okay.
When I was 8, I read A.J.P. Taylor's History of the First World War, which was a ridiculous thing for an 8-year-old to read.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I think the looking back at history and in terms of the lessons that it teaches us, and sometimes unfortunately we fail to listen to them.
Yeah.
So I find history. I find history sad. There's a fantastic book called Birds Without Wings, which I think is probably one of my favourite books, which is about the breakup of the Ottoman Empire.
Okay.
It's the same guy who wrote Captain Corelli's Mandolin, who many people will have heard of Captain Corelli's Birds Without Wings, and it's really about the breakup of a sort of multicultural empire into stuff that became much more religiously divided and the conflicts that there were in between.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great answer. Thank you. And the next question would be, in such a global market like the one that we have nowadays, where you can find really information anywhere, how you keep posted, and now you just, keep posting on news, since, regarding fake news, you can find many fake news online, or,
Yeah, I mean, fake news is a real problem. I think it's going to get bigger. And we've been subject of fake news. That we had some clippings of we had a product recall with Mars bar. I don't know, beginning of 2006, and it was to do with some little bits of plastic got in the product, and it got into a few products, but we had to do a global recall because of the scale of the thing. Someone got footage of some product being destroyed. And this story just went around about 18 countries that these products were being destroyed because the Mars products were poisonous. Wow. And the amazing thing is it took us a good month to even know this was going on.
Yeah.
Now I think this was a few years ago. I think we've got a bit better now on that. So I think on those things, I think it is, you really do need to be monitoring, and you do need to be monitoring pretty broadly to try to know what's going on. I mean, it was our media monitoring that picked up that Donald Trump's son had compared Skittles to a bowl of Syrian refugees. It's a bowl of Skittles to Syrian refugees. I don't know if any of you remember that particular tweet. There are things that when you can pick up things quickly, that you can determine how and when you respond to them. Personally, I'm quite good with company news, because we have people who we pay to give us news feeds.
Okay.
Then in my organization, I'll have people who lead corporate affairs in each of the markets, and every day I get 3 or 4 CA alerts. They're called corporate affairs alerts. That'll tell me.
Wow, I think that's great.
We've done this, we've done that. Hey, this story is breaking. It concerns to So I get those kind of things. I think more generally, then I just rely on brands, news, brands of news. So I'll be looking at brands of news that I trust.
That you trust, yeah. Okay, thank you so much
for your wonderful questions, and for asking those questions so coherently and clear as well. A little bit of consultancy advice for everyone, being PR and all. This is your secret to success. This one day, if you ever want to motivate staff in your company, just have these on the table. These are Mars ice creams. It's all about them. There's something powerful about the Mars ice cream. I don't know if you can see it there.
I can, yes.
You can see it, yeah.
We have a fridge of them upstairs, and it's my biggest problem of wanting to go to that fridge every afternoon and help myself. I love ice cream.
I've done the research. I've done it with thousands of students. When you give a Mars ice cream to them, there's something more powerful and empowering about it, as opposed to a Mars bar. So that's my consultancy for the day. You can motivate anyone, children, friends, family, relatives, and indeed associates or colleagues as well.
Excellent. Well, don't let it melt.
No, not at all. No, this is in a so definitely. Well, Andy, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much indeed.
Have a good evening, all of you.
Well done.
Thank you, Andy.
Bye-bye.
Well done. Bye-bye.